Hey, folks, and welcome back to the United Regional Chambers weekly update. We try and bring you some interesting guests and interesting topics that affect everybody in the region. This week, I'm very pleased to bring on our state senator, State Senator Paul Feeney. Paul is in his second term at Massachusetts State Senate, representing the Bristol and Norfolk districts. Paul was sworn into the Senate on November 1st, 17, after winning a special election at the age of 39. Young guy. Previously, Paul served as the select person in his community of Foxborough from 2007 to 2010, chairman of that board from 2009. He currently is chair of the Joint Committee on Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure. He's the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Paul is a very busy guy, and we're glad that he took the time to come and talk with us today. So welcome, Senator Feeney.
Thank you so much, Jack. It's great to be on. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and have a chat. Very busy time in the legislature, so it's a good time to reconnect.
And, I asked, if you could come on today and maybe update us a little bit on a couple of things going on. I know you're a busy guy, so we won't take up all your afternoon. But the one question that folks have asked me a little bit, and honestly, I don't know enough about, that's why I reached out. Let's talk a little bit about this redistricting and
Sure.
what that would mean for the folks in your district, because we cover just about all of your district.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. Redistricting is something that only happens once every 10 years. So it's not something that I've ever been through as a legislator. And quite frankly, many of my colleagues, this is their first time as well. So, when we talk about redistricting, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, it always follows the federal census. So once every 10 years, we know we do this complete and accurate count of people throughout the country and throughout the Commonwealth. And then essentially what happens is the federal government then gives those numbers to the states. We then filter them down to the local municipalities. Cities and towns will then draw their precincts. And it's all based on having equal sized districts, right? So the precincts will be equal sized. There are some communities in our district that may actually add a precinct. There are some that may have to consolidate, although I don't think we'll have that problem this year. And then once that's complete and we look at what the actual numbers are in each city or town, now based on where they were compared to where they were 10 years ago, then we start to redraw the district lines, and that's state and federal districts. So for our purposes this year, we're going to be redrawing the state house lines. So, you think about who your state representative is, those districts will be redrawn. And then the state senate. So certainly the Bristol and Norfolk district as it stands today may in fact change before the election of 2022. And also our congressional districts. So, last year we had a spirited race in the 4th congressional district, and, that district could change this year. And the thing is, Jack, when we talk about redistricting, right, people's eyes glaze over and they say, well, what does this mean to me? And ultimately, I think that this is one of the most important things that people should be paying attention to over the next few months, which is why I'm thrilled that you asked about it, because this really is about making sure that you have strength on Beacon Hill representing you at the state level and a strong congressional district as well. And the way you do that, at least in my opinion, is you make sure that the process itself is transparent and completely devoid of politics. And this is something that I've been talking about for many, many years, even predating my service in the Senate, that when we redraw these lines, it doesn't matter who's there or who was there or who could be there or what, the person's name or where they come from that is actually thinking about running for these seats. What matters is that you actually have districts that make sense. A few weeks ago, I met with the chair of redistricting in the Senate side, Senator Will Brownsberger. And we took, I think for probably 3.5, almost 4 hours, we drove around the Bristol and Norfolk district. I took them down into Attleboro, went to Seekonk. We started up in Medfield in the northern part of the district, and we talked about communities of interest. We talked about who has a town meeting form of government, open town meeting, representative town meeting. Attleboro has a city council and a mayor. We talked about socioeconomic issues. Attleboro being a gateway city versus maybe some of the other wealthier towns in the district, or Rehoboth, which is right to farm. And we kind of talked about how do these communities fit together and how can we ensure that they have the strongest representation on Beacon Hill? Again, not based on who's in the seat or the person that is going to run, but based on what makes sense in the district. So that's happening now. It's an ongoing process. This year is a little bit challenging because the census numbers, which normally come out in the spring, aren't actually coming out in an official capacity until at the mid-August in a preliminary sense, and then we won't get official numbers, for at least another month after that. So that's creating a little bit of difficulty with the committees that have to do their redistricting, as well as town clerks who have to do all the re-precincting. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a bill at the end of, probably by the end of October, at least a year out from the election, that'll redraw the lines for the State House, State Senate, Governor's Council, and for our Congress people. So it's something to keep an eye on, and I know it's going to be, it won't be on a lot of people's radar screen until we get an actual, redrawn map out. But it's very, very important for people so that they can ensure that they still have, a strong voice in government.
And who actually does the division of lines or lays out those lines in the different districts?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Each state is free to do it how they choose. In Massachusetts, we've always had a standing committee, so we have a House committee that redraws the lines for the House districts. We have a Senate committee that redraws the Senate districts, and then we have a joint committee that redraw the lines in the congressional districts. So those committees are appointed by leadership. So you have chairs that are appointed, just like any other joint committee in the legislature. You have chairs that are appointed by the Speaker and the Senate President, respectively, as well as members. It's bipartisan committee, so you do have representation. In Massachusetts, obviously, the Republican Party is a minority party. They have representation on the committees as well. But they started this work last session. So this isn't something that they just picked up at the beginning of this year. They actually started this last session to try and get an idea and a sense of what the population movement was across the state. And once they were able to do that, because that's really what drives the districts, once they were able to figure out, maybe the southeastern part of the state lost some population to Metro Boston, certainly the western part of the state lost some population, going east of Worcester. Once they had a sense of that, then they were able to kind of start looking at what each of the district sizes were going to be. So there's a committee, a joint committee, and two standing committees from each respective body that have been meeting regularly. As I said, I had an opportunity to meet with the chair recently and actually tour the district, and that'll be ongoing until they come out with a report. Once they come out with a report and a redrafted map, a redrawn map, then that'll come to the actual full body. So that'll go to the House, that'll go to the Senate, and then we vote on it. We vote on it in chamber. We can debate it. We can amend it, just like any other bill.
So all of this information, though, has already been compiled with the census numbers that have been put out, because we helped a little bit with doing the census and stuff like that. So it's all determined on those numbers. There's no one individual or 2-3 individuals who can decide what districts get changed, what districts get consolidated, what gets expanded. It is the full committee on both sides of the floor. Yeah,
absolutely. And you make a great point. I mean, last year we were talking about the census, and I know the chamber did a lot of work around this, and we had so many people that were stepping up to try and make sure that every person was counted. This is one of the reasons why we're doing that, right? It's so important to make sure that we have an understanding of where the population has shifted and how many people are in each city or town. And now we're seeing that play out, because ultimately what happens is, real simple math, right? They look at what the population of Massachusetts is, and then say, for instance, in the Senate, they divide that amongst 40 equal districts. So we take the number that we get from the census on the statewide population, you divide that by 40, there's 40 state senators, and you say this is what the number of people in each district should be. Now, the federal government allows, I think it's within 5% either way, as long as you do your best to kind of get that as close as possible to equal sized districts. But that's what we're working off of. So it's that, that official data to make sure, everybody was counted. That official data is then being used, and that's what the committee has to use to decide on what the maps are going to look like. So it really is, it's an exercise. It's a lot of science, a lot of math, and a little bit of art. To try and figure out at the end of the day, what these districts look like. But it's vitally important, and I'm certainly, sitting in this seat, looking forward to what the end result is, because, you build relationships, right? I mean, I build relationships through each of the cities and towns in my district. If that changes, which it does, every 10 years, you could pick up a town, you could lose a town, you could, however it works out. I'm very interested to see what that looks like and to make sure that, whatever transition there needs to be, if my district remains the same, I will be inordinately happy. I told everybody I would love to have my district remain the same, but sometimes it just doesn't always work out like that. So we'll see what happens and, make sure that there's a seamless transition if there has to be. And, ultimately get ready to go make our case to the voters of our district, however it may be constructed.
None of us like change, buddy. None of us like change.
I hear you.
Well, you have collaborated with us on numerous projects and concerns for our constituents, and we appreciate the cooperation we get from you. I have not met him yet, Keith. We've had some conversation on the phone, but he says he's seen my ugly mug at a couple of different things, so I'll have to introduce myself the next time I see him. A question I have for you, and this was posed to me just yesterday. With this coronavirus and a lot of people leaving metropolitan areas like Boston, would that affect these numbers that the census gave out or gave to you to work with? Is that going to affect you at all?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I mean, and that's really the big unknown. And this was, considered all last year while the census was ongoing. Were we actually capturing where people where they lived? And I think that the census that happened last year, although it had some roadblocks and unfortunately some stumbles out of the gate, and then you had the pandemic, which changed the whole, the enumeration process where I think people were used to you folks showing up at the with the clipboard at the door, right, and saying,
yep,
who lives here, what do you do, how old are you, and how many live here, and that all changed, and that went largely online. So that we're pretty confident. I know the Secretary of the Commonwealth has been paying attention. It's under his jurisdiction to make sure that the federal government is providing accurate numbers, and that the count in Massachusetts was done accurately. But it's a great question, Jack, because we don't know. We're studying now in the Senate, and I know there's some folks over in the House that are looking at the same thing. What is the future of work, right? I mean, you talk about from your perspective at the chamber. I mean, now that everybody is had the opportunity for a year to actually work from home, where maybe they didn't, prior to that, where we've seen now with social distancing and some of the other guidelines, you look at the price of real estate. If for nothing else, it's because a lot of people, especially commercial, I'm in Boston now at the State House, and I'm looking out at some of the high-rise office towers. You can't put as many people in office as you used to. So now your cost per employee on that floor has actually gone up. So what does that mean? Does that mean that more employers are going to embrace work from home? If that happens, does that mean now that you don't have to live as close to the city? You don't have to live close to Boston. You don't have to live close to Providence. Maybe you can go and work remotely in, downtown Goshen, Massachusetts, right? Which, is far away from any of the municipalities that, are in our area. So there is this question on what the future work is going to be. And I've met personally, and I know many of my colleagues as well. We've had many briefings with economists trying to figure out what this is going to look like. We've spoken with chambers of commerce throughout the Commonwealth to say, what is your experience? We're here to listen. Tell us what businesses are going to start to do and what the employee behavior is. We look at transportation. I mean, Rep. Hawkins, Senator Roush, Rep. Scanlon, and I have been meeting and talking a lot about what's happening in South Attleboro at the commuter rail station. In my district, I have Mansfield commuter rail, which is one of the most heavily used commuter rail stations in the Commonwealth. I have Sharon, which has limited parking. We have Walpole. We have this new pilot program in Foxborough. And, quite frankly, Jack, before the pandemic, you couldn't find parking on any of them. And if you weren't getting on the train before 7 o'clock in the morning, forget about it. I mean, you just, you couldn't park. And we were working with the MBTA to say, what are we going to do to solve this? Can we devote some resources to additional parking? What do we do? Well, that's all changed. That's been turned upside down because now you just don't see the amount of people, the amount of riders and users on the commuter rail that we were seeing previously. Is that going to stay like that? Is that going to change? Are people going to, is it going to be probably more of a hybrid model where a few days a week people will work from home, a couple days a week they'll go into the into the city. So, not only does it affect our census going forward and where people are living, but really from an entire, kind of holistic perspective of this, it's going to change a lot of things that we became accustomed to before the pandemic, from transportation to, the cost of real estate, and childcare, and all these enabling factors that really we become accustomed to, that people relied on to go to work every day. So all that's changing, and my God, I wish I had a crystal ball, but we're going to stay on top of it and try and figure this out going forward.
Yeah, it's almost an impossible situation, because you don't have all the facts and the figures that you need to make accurate determinations of what's going to happen. I know that a lot of our commercial real estate is wide open.
Right.
If any of my folks are looking for any spots, all they got to do is call, and I can put them in touch with numerous opportunities. I don't see that changing. I think you were right that more people are going to be accustomed to working remotely, even if it's 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and the whole transportation structure is going to be changed.
Right.
Can you give us a little update? I know that you and Jim Hawkins have worked a lot on the South Attleboro station. Can you give us any updates on that?
Yeah, still in progress. So, for folks that weren't aware, and I know a lot of people have been dialed into this issue, but South Attleboro train station, Rep Hawkins and myself, really under his leadership, he was a dogged advocate for making sure that we were repairing and upgrading that station for a long time. Matter of fact, we went to we had a little press interview there one day, and we were trying to show the dire repair that the station was in. And I had reached up, Jack, and up underneath the stairs, and I kind of just gave a little bit of a tug to a piece of the metal. And of course, I said, geez, I don't know my own strength, but I almost pulled down half the stair. Yeah. And of course, the thing crumbles to the ground, and there happened to be a news camera who caught the whole thing. And I said, look, if that doesn't prove it. So after we left that press conference, I went and I said I should have got a tetanus shot, but I didn't. We went right back to the MBTA and said, look, this is crumbling. You got to do something about this. And it just, it takes a lot of noise. And luckily with Rep Hawkins, leading the way and making a lot of noise, and myself and the rest of my colleagues in the delegation, and really not even just the Attleboro delegation, but the area delegation, we pushed the MBTA to say, you got to do something. Well, we got the project reinstated. We got some resources devoted to that. We got a commitment that they were going to upgrade the station, modernize it, and really invest in South Attleboro before they did any other projects across the state, which was important. And then, of course, we find out as they were doing some routine inspections that it was in bad shape. The overpass was in jeopardy of falling apart and deteriorating, and so they had to close it down. So we're still in the process now. We meet with them fairly regularly to get updates. Don't have a complete timeline yet on completion of the project, but we just wanted to make sure that any riders that were displaced were able to to be handled by other stations, by downtown Attleboro or some of the other stations in the area. And as bad as it seems to say, thank God we're in the midst of a pandemic and we didn't see the actual ridership to where it was, right? Because that would have just caused a whole new headache and wreaked havoc. So hopefully by the time we get a little bit back to normal and people are on the trains, and we'll have that South Attleboro station upgraded and developed and modern and accessible and all the other good things that come with it.
I'm even afraid to say this, but are we ever going to get back to normal, Paul? I don't know. Nothing to what we were used to.
No, it's crazy. And Jack, I'm in the State House today, right? And so, we're still trying to figure out kind of what it's going to look like here. I mean, I come to work in a public building that I'm blessed. Every time I walk in the door, I'm like, my God, it's like working in a museum, and the amount of history that you see is just incredible. And there's the public's here, right? So you have, it's tourist season. There's people in Boston walking the Freedom Trail that would normally come into the building. Then you have, activists, and we have, protests, and we have people advocating for the bills. People come up from the, constituents from the district, and they want to meet with you in the State House. None of that is happening right now. Our State House is still closed to the general public. Our sessions are still in some sort of, we're still hybrid, so I can certainly come into the Senate chamber and debate, or call in the House doing the same thing. And as we look to the months ahead, and even for the rest of the session, we're trying to figure out, what have we learned? What can we keep that actually works well? And how do we get back to normal? And what struck me is just how, it's like turning the Titanic, right? How difficult it's been to get back to normal in certain sectors. And certainly in the Massachusetts State House, we haven't wavered. I mean, when we had the pandemic hit us last year, I was working, I think, probably 18-hour days with my staff, for a couple of reasons. One was trying to mitigate the public health impact and make sure that people were actually staying safe. But then two, when we saw the economic downturn and the amount of unemployment, we were up over 20% unemployment at one point, Jack. And we get, people calling in, they're dealing with Department of Unemployment Assistance. They were getting, there was an enormous amount of fraud on the state, which meant that anybody that was collecting unemployment now had to submit all new paperwork. Well, can you imagine telling somebody that, is maybe not the most computer savvy, or, some older people that never were on unemployment in their life, that all of a sudden, because of a pandemic, they find themselves unemployed. They turn to their safety net and they said, what do you mean I have to submit, my all these documents online? I don't know how to do this. We were literally going to people's houses trying to figure this out, and help them out. And it's waned a little bit, but it's changed everything. And I think the pandemic for us has laid bare to a lot of issues that existed prior to the COVID-19, that we've been talking about, but that we never addressed. And I think we have an opportunity now, when we talk about things like the future of work, when we talk about transportation, we talk about commercial real estate, transit-oriented development, where people are going to live, where they're going to work, childcare, right? Where childcare exists. When we can talk about all those things now and say, okay, if we are going to build back, let's do it better. And let's make sure that whatever our new normal is actually meeting the needs and responding to these systemic issues that we saw prior to the pandemic, so that we become better off as a Commonwealth.
And that's it. And people just got to have a little bit more patience. I know we've asked for patience for almost 2 years now.
Right.
We're going on 18, 19 months. And it's very difficult. All of us, are in, I can't say we're in the same boat. I heard a very good thing a couple of weeks ago. We're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Right. Some boats are more stable than a Little John boat. So we each have to be a little bit more patient, a little kinder to each other. And we will get through this, because we're a strong Commonwealth. We've always had issues in the past that we've fought through and worked together, and hopefully we can continue to do that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Jack. And I just, I want to take the opportunity to say this, because, I think we're in a pretty scary time in our country where, divisiveness kind of rules the day, and there's a lot of cynicism, and everything becomes political. My God, as somebody who's in politics, some days I just shake my head and say, how does, wearing a mask, or excuse me, or, getting a vaccine, or everything just becomes political and becomes divisive. When we come together and actually try and focus on each other's problems and solve them, we become a lot stronger, and we actually get stuff done. When I think about, the business community, I know, representing the chamber, you've seen this firsthand. We had issues where, restaurants were struggling, retail was struggling, but then they came together and realized that there was food insecurity in their communities with people that didn't have enough food to feed their families for the week. And they said, yeah, we're struggling right now, but at least we can help and do this. We can donate food. We can donate money. And it was one of those things, like, you think in the midst of a pandemic, the natural reaction is to become kind of insular, right? And put up the walls and say, nope, I got to take care of my own. But where we saw, especially in our communities, what we saw was that folks looked out for other people. Somebody showed up to a food drive that we had last year in Attleboro, and I'll never forget it. And, dropped off a little bit of food, didn't have a ton. And of course, every donation really helped us to what we were trying to do for food insecurity. And he said, hey, I stood in that line not too long ago, and I didn't have enough food for myself. And now I have a little bit more I can give back. And it kind of, blew me away, right? In this business where you get, as you know, you get kind of thick skin and big shoulders, and
Yeah.
you lose the ability to be surprised sometimes. But there are those moments where you just get stopped in your tracks, and you're like, my God, even people that don't have a lot are looking out for somebody else and trying to help them out. And when we come together and do that, and we saw that over this past year in many, many ways, it just gives me a little bit of hope. And maybe sometimes it sounds a little bit Pollyannish, but I really do believe in it. There is room to hope if we can come together and actually look out for each other and try and solve each other's problems and help each other out. I have my interns in here today, Jack. I had a summer intern program. I love having, some of the youngest students come in, college freshmen, high school seniors that are moving on to college. And we, have them come in and work on policy and work on constituent services and do some research and help me through the legislative process on some bills they're working on. And this is their last week. They've been doing it remotely for the last couple of months. So I wanted to come in today and just make sure that we kind of met and debriefed on the work that they were doing. And I wanted to make it a rewarding experience as much as possible for that. But every there. And, talking to these young people, talking to these interns who have had, the most tumultuous couple of years, whether it's, trying to graduate high school in the midst of a pandemic and figure out graduation or losing prom or sports seasons and things like that. But man, they're resilient, right? They are resilient, and they're just trying to figure out a better way. And if this becomes new normal, then, they'll figure out a way to cope. And it just gives me a little bit of hope going forward.
Well, and that's what we all need. We all need that little bit of hope. Well, Paul, we got to wrap it up a little bit. Have you got a last couple of thoughts for us?
Sure. I really appreciate it, Jack, as always, WACS for doing this as well. I'm open and available and accessible to people. We have office hours every month. If people have any issues they want to talk to me about, policy or they need request any assistance with any sort of departments within the Commonwealth, I'm happy to help. But I really appreciate the opportunity. We have a very, very busy legislative schedule coming up towards the end of this year, and I know we're going to be, working hard to make sure that the recovery money that's coming from the federal government is actually being reinvested in our communities and our small businesses and the people that need it, and offering a safety net to the folks that were hard hit from the pandemic. So pay attention to that. Keep it on your radar screen. If there's anything, any questions that I can answer or anything I can do for you, I just encourage people to reach out to me, Jack, at my office, 617-722-1222. That's 722-1222. Or they can always send me an email, paul.feeney@masenate.gov. That goes right to my phone, and my staff and I will be happy to help.
Well, folks, I got to tell you, anytime I reach out to Paul, there's not even a question. He picks up the phone, or it says, I'll call you back in an hour. He always calls me back. So if we ever reach out to the senator's office, his team, they're very, very easy to talk to. They're very understanding, and they won't leave you hanging. They get back to you, which is very important. So, Senator Paul Feeney, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you. You are the best. Thank you.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Folks, thank you very much for joining us again this week. Hopefully, you'll be able to jump in next week. Next week, it looks like we're going to have the new superintendent of Tri-County Regional Vocational Technical High School to come on and tell us what her plan is moving forward, because of all the communities that they cover and the kids that go there. Some, are looking for intern jobs. Some are looking for after-school jobs. So hopefully we can help out and put some connections together, because that's what the chamber is all about. We're just not a chamber of commerce. We're a chamber of connections. And if there's anything that you as an individual or as a business think that the chamber can do to help, please pick up the phone, give us a call, shoot me an email. Once again, huge thank you to Dave Angel over at WACS for putting up with me and putting on our shows every week. And folks, be kind, be safe, and we'll see you next week.